So what I'm going to do a little bit today is I'm going to talk a bit about programmatic, and actually what I was asked to do was talk a bit about the history and how we got to where we are today. And then I'm going to talk a bit about the future as I see it for programmatic. And again, we're sort of drawing a bit on industry parallels. One is finance. I'm going to talk a little bit about the electricity industry actually, and sort of draw a parallel between the electricity industry and how electricity is traded and how inventory is traded. So first of all, before we do that, a little bit about our business for those of you who don't know Xaxis, and literally I just have 2 slides on this, but the way we don't actually describe ourselves as a trade desk. I know other people describe us as a trade desk, and we'll put up the wonderful Terry Kawaja Lumiscape in a minute, where everyone has a box except for AppNexus, who gets its own box. But we actually describe ourselves as an audience business. So we work with data and technology to help our agencies and our clients target audiences very directly. We're about a $750 million business. That's following the merger recently with 24/7, and we've also announced some interesting acquisitions. Banner Connect, which is a trade desk in the Netherlands, really smart bunch of guys, some really great technology. In 43 offices in 32 markets. And just to give you a sense of the scale of the business, about half of that is in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Okay, so the business we have here in Europe is very scaled. UK and Germany are our 2 biggest markets out of that. And one of the things we're very proud of is, of course, also the fact that I think as slightly unique in this industry, WPP has a position in the technology business. We're actually interested in building not all of our own technology, but some of our own technology. And obviously we have over 50 partnerships with Exxon companies like AppNexus and many others, because we don't think we can build the whole stack, but certainly we think we want to build those things that create real value for our clients and for our agencies. So that's enough about Xaxis. How do we get here? So what's really interesting is with all this new technology and all this stuff that's going on, fundamentally the challenge of marketing hasn't really changed. And you know, if you go back to the dawn of marketing, I suppose, you know, there were marketers who were interested in reaching consumers, and publishers who had that audience. So, you know, the advertising industry would place ads on media, obviously. That all got a bit complicated, so along came all the wonderful agencies who helped the clients and the marketers sort of, you know, understand this incredibly complicated media space, which was sort of starting to evolve. But for all the best will in the world, those agencies couldn't navigate every single publisher every single time. Right? So along came all the wonderful ad networks, and there were many of them, especially in markets like the UK and the US, many ad networks coming along who created packaged solutions for the agencies to more easily access a diverser range of inventory. And also, of course, to help publishers monetize that inventory as well. But then the agencies sort of said, well, hang on a second, you know, technology is evolving to a point where I want a slice of that action. I can do that. I can actually help my clients do this more effectively. I can access the long tail of inventory more effectively. I don't need to buy a pre-packaged thing off an ad network. So along came companies like ours, and of course also pure play technology companies like the demand side platforms and the exchanges. And, you know, a whole set of other companies which, you know, helped that industry with creative optimization technologies, with media planning, with, you know, the DMPs, verification, data suppliers, etc. A whole ecosystem evolved around the fact that agencies were starting to do more and more of this themselves. But of course, the publishers didn't want to get left out, so you know, the supply side platforms came along to say, okay, well, I'm going to help publishers in this, you know, incredibly suddenly complex ecosystem monetize their inventory as well. So along came the supply side platforms to help the publishers work out which of this very complex industry is best to work with to maximize their yields. So that's where we sort of ended up. And by the way, this is only one, the guy who puts this together is a guy called Terry Kawaja at Lumiscape. They're actually an investment bank in New York. And if you look, who's seen this before, by the way? So most people have seen this before, right? If you look closely, you can see little red boxes around some of the companies. They're the companies that have been acquired. So he uses this as a way to sort of hopefully simplify this industry for his clients and show them where the opportunities are. I've only ever seen this slide presented for one reason, and that's to show the ridiculous complexity in our industry. That's the only reason I use it. I would never use this to try and actually make head or tail of the way the industry is structured. But it's a fantastic way to show just how complex where we are today is. And what's interesting as well is there are actually more than one of these. This is just the display market. There's a whole separate one for video. There's another one for mobile. There's another one for the investors. There's another one for trade desks. There's another one for data providers. And there's literally, I think, 9 or 10 of these now, just for the digital advertising industry. So it's incredibly diverse, incredibly complex, and very difficult for a lot of people to navigate around. And of course, always changing. You know, with all of these more technology focused businesses, and with the agencies becoming more literate in technology through companies like ours as well, you know, of course, there's a question mark over some of the value that was being delivered by these packaged solutions by the ad networks. You know, and so I'm sure all of you are seeing, I mean, you're all agencies, you're probably seeing your level of investment in ad networks go down, the number of ad networks in the market decreasing as well, and a lot of ad networks pivoting to sort of try and be more like a technology type company as well. So that's sort of where we are right now. The question then is, okay, so which of all of that is programmatic? What does programmatic actually mean? And so I thought I'd do a quick pop quiz here as well. Keep it interactive. You know, people, you want to do standing up and sitting down? We can do that as well. That's fine. I was going to do hands, but let's do standing up, right? Stand up if you think that is programmatic. No one ever stands up for the first one, by the way, because they're going, okay, hang on a minute. Okay, the next one might be something better. Okay, fine. So no one thinks that? Okay.
It's going to be like a Mexican way.
Anyone think that's programmatic? So valuing and buying an ad impression in real time and only buying the impression you really want or need. Go on. You've got AppNexus has to stand up for this one.
For the first
stand
one,
up if you think that's one. You think the first one? Yeah? All right. What about this one? Using technology to decide which ad server is based, which ad to serve based on an audience or a website that's given rights to that opportunity. Yeah? That's programmatic. Dynamically tailoring creative depending on the audience or the placement. Yep, programmatic. Connecting data sources from a vast array of sources. Programmatic, yeah, good. I think they're all programmatic. So hopefully you're all standing at some point. I actually genuinely, was there another one? No, okay. I'm just wondering why I have a tick next to an empty, did I miss one? I think one of the problems with programmatic is the fact that it has so many different definitions that it's become almost meaningless. You know, there was a great quote someone once mentioned to me. He said, if you want to know how to use a fax machine, go and ask someone who works go and ask a digital media buyer. Because at one point they were the only people who still know how to use fax machines. So is the fact that they're now processing those buying orders directly through technology, is that programmatic? Yeah, I think it is. You know, there are so many different parts and elements to programmatic. So I have a real sort of love-hate relationship with programmatic. You know, only one of those things on there is actually RTB, the way that, you know, many people sort of think, oh, okay, well, RTB is programmatic and programmatic is RTB. So I sort of have a love-hate relationship with programmatic. And the reason is I think programmatic implies that everything can be done with machines. Right? And I've got so many clients who have said to us, oh, well, you know, if you're buying so much programmatically, then, hey, we can reduce the FTE count. We don't need as many people anymore. I'm sure you guys as agencies have heard the same thing. And, you know, the obvious thing that's missing, and the reason I hate the term, there are obviously amazing opportunities being created by this whole programmatic space in terms of process efficiencies, effectiveness, targeting, etc. But the reason I hate it is because it just makes this implication that people don't matter anymore. Right? That all of you guys can one day be redundant because technology will just basically, you know, exist on its own, that every client will have a big optimize button sitting on their desks and they just need to go up in the morning and push the optimize button and go and do some other stuff, and then, you know, at the end of the day, a beautifully optimized, wonderfully presented, perfectly reported campaign will be sitting in their inbox. And we know that's not the case. If anything, what we need is different types of people. We need more data scientists, we need technologists, we need analysts, we need those kinds of people. And I think, you know, again, the word programmatic does us a disservice in a sense because it overemphasizes the role of the technology and the overall balance of how this stuff gets delivered. So the question then is it the future? And the example I wanted to draw on in particular is, you know, I know RTB gets talked about a lot. You know, a lot of our clients are saying, I want to buy some RTB, I want to do RTB. You know, they're all, this idea of RTB has really captured their imaginations. So I wanted to sort of look at a parallel industry and sort of ask the question about, you know, whether RTB specifically is, you know, is going to be, you know, to what extent is it the future of our industry? So looking at electricity. In electricity, there are some very interesting similarities between electricity and digital inventory. One of those similarities, probably the most important, is you can't store electricity. right? So if you can't put it in a box and sell it later, right? Just like digital inventory. If you haven't sold the ad now, you can't sell it tomorrow, you can't sell it yesterday. There's only one chance to put an ad in that box, and that's now, at this particular point in time. Same with electricity. Electricity only has a value right now. You can't store it, you can't give it to someone tomorrow or buy it tomorrow. You have to buy it now. So it's a non-storable asset. And if you look at economic theory, the way to clear the most efficient way to clear a market where you can't store the asset is through an auction. Right? It's through the buyers and sellers coming together at that exact point of time and deciding and agreeing on what the value of that asset is literally at that exact moment in time. So it doesn't actually matter what that asset is or might be worth tomorrow because you didn't store it. Right? So that's very important. And if you look at electricity, this is how electricity is traded. Okay, so power stations are constantly generating electricity into the grid, and the companies you buy your power off are buying that electricity, and the price is being set in an auction constantly. Every, I think, 5 minutes in the UK, every half an hour in Australia, depends. And so that gives rise to some really interesting dynamics. This is sort of over the day. You can see in the middle of the night the price of electricity goes almost to zero, and then there's various peaks during the day as factories start up, and you get higher peaks in sort of some parts of the year when there's summer and there are air conditioners. So you get this really interesting dynamic price, which depends on the demand and supply dynamics around an asset which can only really be valued at that point in time. Right? So it's a really interesting industry. But there's also some really big differences between what we do, so digital inventory, and electricity. So the first thing is electricity is all the same. Right? There's no good or bad electricity. Whereas, of course, we know that in our industry, there's a huge amount of difference between different ad impressions. And not just the formats. There's obviously huge amounts of different formats, more all the time, as we know. But also, what's the device? Viewability questions, the buying models, above the fold, below the fold. I mean, there are so many different questions around the quality of inventory that it's very difficult to say that it's all the same. And that matters. The next thing is, with electricity, the supplier, the power station, doesn't care who the buyer is. Right? This power station doesn't sell to you, but not you. Right? Whereas in our industry, we know that that is the case. The sellers do care who the buyers are. Publishers, when you speak to them, are very interested in who their advertisers are. They're not completely, they'd much rather have a nice premium brand than a gambling site. Or they'd much rather have a brand that they already have a big relationship with, say, in TV or in other parts of their media portfolio rather than a new advertiser. So the supply side in our industry does care who the demand side is. Then the other question, or the other difference is, in electricity, the buyer doesn't care who the seller is. Right? You don't know, or your distributor doesn't know or care which power station you get the electricity from. It's all the same. It doesn't matter if it's a big brown coal-fired power station or a hydro dam somewhere. It doesn't matter. It's electricity. They'll buy it. It's all the same. And the suppliers are all the same. There's no good or bad suppliers. Whereas you guys know that your clients are very interested in who your partners are, who the publishers are that they're working with. And the last one is the technology. Maybe because of those differences, the technology also isn't all the same. In electricity trading, because of those dynamics, because the product is completely the same everywhere, the buy side and the sell side don't care who each other are, the technology that powers the auction is very, very simple. And there's no good or bad technology. There's no, I work with this technology provider, or I want to work with that technology provider. But we all know in our industry, because I think of some of the complexities of the industry, there are many DSPs, there are many different technology vendors which capture certain parts of the value chain or try to sort of fix one of these distortions by creating technology. There's viewability providers who try and fix the question of viewability. There's, and anyone who runs a programmatically bought campaign knows you usually work with more than one DSP. Different DSPs do different things better than others. Right? So again, the technology is also very different. So again, a big difference between electricity and our industry. So then the question, and really the last point is, coming back to the original question. So in electricity now, it's all traded on a real-time basis, because in that industry, it makes a huge amount of sense because of all the things I talked about. Right? So the question is, will that happen in advertising? Like, do we think, based on those distortions in the market, or even just what we see every day today, that we will end up buying, and all of our inventory will be executed, leave aside programmatically for a second, but in a real-time way, where the market comes together. And I think no. I think there'll always be a role for it, and certainly that role is expanding, and there's more and more different opportunities for it. But to me, there's actually the Huffington Post who talk about the barbell with their business. And I think it's a very interesting analogy. It's about balance. They talk about, on the one side, I can't remember what you called it in the setup, not the opposite of RTB. On your first slide. Anyway, the sort of the highly engaging, relationship board, placement board type of media.
Oh, set piece.
Set piece, thank you. That's what I was looking for. Right? Yeah, I sort of made a note of it and forgot. On the one side, the sort of the set piece media, which is really important. With the amount of media clutter and the difficulty in cutting through that, the creative use of media buying is just as important as the RTB or the programmatic side of things. And again, programmatic may help facilitate that in some ways, right? Is not necessarily a bad thing, but again, it's about balance. Whereas on the other side, programmatic and RTB and all those other things are creating really interesting ways to buy and to work with media, but in a very different kind of way. And what's important about this, one thing that's important, it's about the balance. And the other thing that's important, it's about having a very strong link between the two of them. Right? They don't exist independently. If you want to lift this thing up, you can't have a piece of string in the middle. It's not going to work. Right? You have to be able to lift it up. And to do that, you need a strong connection between the two sides. And so to me, and sort of our point of view on this is, it's always going to be about balance. It's an exciting world. It's definitely one that you spend time understanding and learning. I know a lot of you are sort of just starting out on this. There's loads of opportunities, but it's always about balance. And I don't think it's going to be 100% about programmatic anytime soon anyway. Okay. Thank you.